Thank you for coming. Hello, so my name is Christina. I'm the project manager for the Living Archives Project, which is a 3-year project. And we are so excited to interview Makayla Binter, who worked on the Pandemic graphic novel, which was beautifully done. We have Omar and Rana. Am I saying it right? Rana? Rana. Okay. Sorry about that. From South Boulevard Library, and I will let you all get started.
Thank you so much. Hi, Makayla. It's a pleasure to meet you. Like we were saying, my name is Rana Silvea.
My name is Omar Ramirez.
And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. Happy to be here.
We're really excited to ask you some questions, get to know a little bit more about you. So first question, how did you come to be a part of the Pandemic project with journalism in Boom, Charlotte?
Yeah, so Marcus Kaiser, who's on the project and helped do the design for the cover, and then also did the first and last chapter, I believe, messaged me one day and was like, hey, there's going to be a comic book that talks about visualizing different stories from different newspapers across Charlotte, and they're looking for artists to bring them to life. Would you be interested? And then I got really scared because I was like, oh my gosh, comic book. I have never done anything comic related ever in my life. I thought it was super cool, like in high school when I was a kid, but not necessarily like great at it. And he was like, don't worry, like we'll help you along the way. And then we'll also get you connected with a newspaper writer and a reporter. There we go. And yeah, that was like how I got involved in the first place.
So when you talked about like the reporter, did you meet with Sabrina, I believe was her name, Sabrina
Yes.
Clark?
Yeah.
Were you guys like given options for the stories you chose, or you're just kind of paired up with someone, or something?
Yeah, we were given like some kind of options. They were like, so here are the stories that we're picking from. If you guys like lean more towards one, definitely let us know. But otherwise, like we'll basically be randomly assigned. And her story was the one that I picked, especially since she's a Black woman. So I was like, her.
That's awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about the story that you illustrated?
Yeah. So I chose the story that was about an older gentleman. He happened to have his dad pass away. Well, actually, his mom passed away first, and then he had to basically, over the course of like taking care of his dad got COVID, and then his dad passed away not too long after that. And it was basically just like his journey of like remembering like his mom, remembering his dad, but then also dealing with his own case of COVID. And then just like how difficult that was for him, like mental illness wise, but then also like physically, emotionally, mentally. And then just like the difficulties that also came with civil unrest at the time too, of like people not wanting to wear masks and all that kind of stuff. And so he became a really big advocate for people wearing masks, like, hey, like this is how it's affected me. And so he was just trying to relate to people in that way.
We were kind of curious, how did you feel when you first heard that story? Obviously, it's a very compelling narrative. It's a very strong one and also a very difficult one. So what were some of your thoughts, some of your feelings?
So it was obviously like extremely sad. Like, I know the pandemic, like everyone had losses during this time, whether that is like loss of people, loss of time, loss of like events, like opportunities. Like there was a big mourning process going on. Like I was going through my own mourning process, like not in that severity, but definitely like I like had lost like parts of my senior year. I had lost parts of like my college career. And so like and so like that really like connecting with him in that way. And then also understanding like how strong he felt afterwards. So like being able to work through those emotions, but then still feeling very connected to his family, through like photography, through memories, through all the things that I feel like sometimes we can take for granted. And it was actually like just really inspiring and helped me a lot to make the comic. Not only being able to talk to Sabrina, but then also reading and rereading the story like over and over and over again. Does that answer your question?
I mean, above and beyond it.
Okay.
I think all relate to stories helping us process things, and art is another way that people, I think, really work through what they're experiencing. So I think a lot of people would probably relate to that.
Yeah, definitely. I know I read through all of the comics. I found out about the project when it was before the actual physical comic book was published. So it's really cool to see new chapters being uploaded continuously. And I think it really let me kind of jump into someone else's like shoes for a moment, just to see how everyone's being affected by the pandemic, and kind of like what you mentioned, just kind of like, as Rana mentioned, you get to process all these difficult things. And I thought it was really cool. Something that really drew me in about this was, sorry, my brain's like.
You're good. You're good. It is 6 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Not to cut you off, but kind of to pick up on what you were saying. So as you were processing and rereading, what was the planning process like for you artistically in terms of putting this together?
I'd never storyboarded before, but that's kind of where it started, was like, okay, linearly, how does the story go? Where is it going? And then like, what am I trying to represent through each board? For the first time I used the comic book like pamphlet thing, like panels. In Procreate. And so I was like, whoa, this is really exciting. But yeah, it was basically just like, what are the key points of this story that I would really like to reflect and would like to represent? And then how can I do that in a style that makes sense for me, but also like is reflective of myself as an artist? And yeah. And so like, that was kind of like the planning process. I think the hardest part was probably like filling it in and coloring it. I didn't really know how exactly I wanted to do that. Like, I think we all know like comic books have like the very scratchy, sketchy style. And then also like those shading with the dots, like that kind of thing. I'd never used any of those type of techniques. So I was also like kind of winging it in that respect. But yeah, like that planning process kind of took a lot longer than I thought it would, but not in a bad way. Like it was like a very, very strong learning process.
I think we had thought about that a lot, just looking through your art prior to this interview, about how this stylistically is a little bit different for you, right? And it's interesting really to hear you say that about accommodating or adjusting like your style to match this graphic novel format. And so that had been one of the questions that we wanted to ask you, was kind of how did you have to adapt? But you kind of answered that pretty thoroughly. So kind of moving topics a little bit, you mentioned this briefly about, going through your own mourning period with COVID, with missing parts of your senior year and college, but how has the pandemic and COVID affected you positively or negatively?
Yeah. So like, I guess negatively, like, my senior spring was cut in March. And so that also meant not only like my time with like my Davidson friends, the people that, like I had grown with for the last 4 years, but then that also meant, the end of my track career. So like, I wasn't expecting that to happen so fast. So then when it did, I was like, but like out of that came also like, I got to do a ton of art. Like I really thought I was going to go into a whole different field. I got my degree in biology and studio art, and I really wanted to be a sports medicine person. Like I really wanted to go into sports medicine. I wanted to be a physical therapist. I wanted to work with athletes. And so I was like gung ho on that. But then like all of these like art opportunities started popping up. I started applying for fellowships and grants and like different community art projects. And like, I kept getting them. And I was like, okay, well, obviously the sports medicine thing is not supposed to happen right now. Or like the biology thing is just only for art at this point. And yeah, and like literally it just didn't stop. And so I think it's because of like a combination of like the pandemic, George Floyd, like the Black Lives Matter movement, and then also just like different institutions' awareness of like Black people. Like them being like, oh, well, we should give people more opportunities. And so then here I am like, hey, applying for things. And they were like, but obviously in the best way, like not only has it really helped me grow as an artist, but then it's also been really inspiring for like other younger people that are after me, that are just like, oh my gosh, I love what you do. Like I love art. How do I do art like you? Or like, how do I get into the same rooms that you've had? Or like, how do I have the same opportunities? And so I've become like a big open book basically of like all of this stuff of just like how, and then also of course, like telling my story in this way, so that people are also like, I resonate with these things, and also being open to answering any kind of questions that come along.
I mean, yeah, definitely. Visibility is super important. And I know you were involved with a lot of like local projects here in Charlotte with Beatties Ford Road. I know you did some mural work as well. I was checking out your website earlier just to see like what you were doing, and I thought it was really awesome. And I can see like the difference between like your art style digitally versus traditionally. I know traditionally you go for those like these very vibrant, bold colors. Like everything I looked at, it just like my eyes just like popped like straight to them. I just kept cycling through your work. So I see that you have like a couple different styles you've explored throughout like your artist profile website. I know you've done some photography, you've done murals, you've done some digital work. Do you have like a preferred medium?
I guess paintings at this point. My solo show was like all paintings and photography, or I guess like photo collage work. But I will say the photo collage is really fun. Like it's a lot of fun to make and do. And then you also it's like obviously digital work in general is like really cool because you can like do, redo, do over again, like save, and then just keep moving and just keep making it. So I like that flexibility, and I also like how fast I can move. Paintings are not always that way. Paintings can be like almost like you're in conversation with it all the time. Like these are done, but imagine this wall covered with paintings, right? And then even when they're not done, they just kind of sit up there because I'm always looking at them. I'm always like that corner is not working for me. Or like this section is gorgeous. How can I reflect that elsewhere? And so it's more of an active conversation rather than like digital art where I can kind of like have like checkpoints, if that makes sense. And then also I just love the physical aspect of painting. Like I love getting dirty. Anytime you will ever see me paint anything, I'm covered in paint. So I love that aspect too. I just like getting into it. Like I love getting dirty.
To kind of keep talking about your preferred genre or medium. So in terms of reading and literature, what is your preferred genre?
Oh, wow. Nonfiction, actually. I love, like literally I'm looking at the books I have right now and basically they're all nonfiction. I don't even know the last time I read a fantasy book, but anyway, I just love like very historical context, not self-help, but like community help books. So like the one I'm reading right now is called Superior, and it talks about race science and how the birth of race science is everything that our medical field is based upon. And it is so interesting. Before that, I read Caste, I've read a couple of books for my master's program that weren't necessarily in like my syllabus, but I read them to like prepare myself. So those are like hip hop architecture, Black in Place, and Spatializing Blackness. And all of those are talking about urban design and Black people. And then also like the design of the grid. And so like books like that, like a lot of my books are like, I have stamped from the beginning. This other book I started reading, which is called Hood Feminism. So like very academic books, but like are still very applicable in everyday life. I think my favorite so far is Belong. It's like a self-help book, but it's like finding and building community. So there's a lot of really great pages for you to like stop and actually write and stuff in them. And I love doing that too, like sticky notes, writing, underlining, things like that. But that book specifically has been really cool and applicable, especially for like community engagement stuff.
I'll have to look that up. Belong. I know Hood Feminism. I think it's by Maggie Kendall, if I remember correctly.
Yes, yep.
She's on Twitter. She's very
like,
funny.
can I see this far?
I don't know if you're on Twitter, but she's very funny on there. But since you mentioned some books and we do work at a library, I think you would like. I had a little bit of a linguistics bend when I was in college, and there's a book that we took called Articulate While Black that specifically analyzes the way that the Obama run for presidency was perceived like in the American public. And it's by two linguists, but they kind of, it's like half academic, half more mainstream, and like it's like a random plug, but I think actually you might enjoy it. So
no, that sounds so cool.
I'll read Belong, you read that one, and then we'll exchange notes later. But before, I'm gonna steal one more question before I get back to you. But you did also talk about never having read, comics in high school. So specifically, what comics did you read, or do you remember reading?
I am a huge Spider-Man fan. My friends know that of me through and through. But in my apartment right now, I have like some vintage Spider-Man, like Amazing Spider-Man comics. And then I also have Sleepwalker, not the same thing, but same energy. And so like definitely those. I was like super nerdy in high school too. So I watched a lot of like anime, and like I watched a lot of like animated shows, like Teen Titans and things like that. So of course, like I had an idea in my head of like what comic books were supposed to be or what they're supposed to look like, but I was like, that's not how I draw. So how can I adapt it to my style, especially since I also knew like this wasn't necessarily like an action novel. So how like basically, yeah. But for sure, like the Amazing Spider-Man.
Do you think that your background in like appreciating like comics and anime and animated shows when you were younger influenced your art? I know a lot of like recurring themes in these shows or comic books tend to be like these like very like precise usage of like, the story panels where you only have so much space to like put a message in there or use certain colors. Do you feel like that might have like influenced your art? Even though it's like style, but
yeah, I definitely wanted to draw like my favorite animators. Like for the longest time I thought it'd be so cool to work for like Disney or like draw in anime or like make a manga. Obviously, in high school a girl probably tried to do that and failed. But like I feel like for a long time that's how I drew my people, is like with really just like very disfigured kind of like faces. I had like big eyes, small-ish faces, and then like really eccentric hair. But then like I started making a shift in college because my professors were like, why are you drawing people who are already made? And I'm like, oh, we can't do that. So I definitely took like a hard left and was like, ooh, okay, I can't draw this way. However, but like, obviously there's still things that I really still love about anime, especially drawing styles, like animation styles, and Disney too, has been inspiration for a lot of different projects for me, simply because of just the way how beautiful they are. Just bottom line. The one I'm thinking of is in Frozen 2, when Elsa is like, she found herself and she realizes that she's the fifth being or what spirit or whatever. And then like the smoke is swirling around and she's like waving her little gown thing. I was like, this movie goes crazy. Like the animators in this movie went stupid. Like whoever made this, like they need a raise for real. And then just also understanding the art behind it. Like, and like they're just like the pure creation and like thought process and design team and like everything that goes behind this hour and 30-ish minute movie that I'm watching was just like absolutely gorgeous. And then once it's paired with music, changes the game. So I went on a long stint, but yes.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I know that. I know I've had like families come to the library and they're like, oh, my kid, to read a book or something. And, we're always telling parents, like, if they're reading comic books, graphic novels, what have you, as long as they're reading, that's like kind of hard to get some kids to get into reading. And even though it may not be like the preferred genre format style, it's like a gateway, I feel like, for a lot of people to get into these like really intense, like designed worlds, whether it's like an anime or a comic book, or like you mentioned, like all these Disney films that definitely have like a strong creative, like that's like a big focus of the movies, not just like the storytelling, but like how it's depicted.
I totally agree. And I talk about that. Well, I mean, I don't talk about it a lot, but I definitely totally agree with you. Like, I think especially it can be hard for us to visualize with books sometimes. Like, and I feel like that really turns people off sometimes of just like, I just can't, especially like fiction books is I can't imagine it. Like I can't see it happening. So it's harder for me to dive in. And that's why I think graphic novels are a great step, or even like manga is a great step because you can see it. And then usually the drawings are so beautiful. So then it's like, you feed right off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you don't want to stop because you're just like, whoa. And yeah. So it's like like you said, if you're reading, then like, doesn't matter what.
To continue on this, people, as you mentioned, Omar, there's a lot of stigma, and kind of as you were mentioning, Makayla, about in the art world as well, but on the literary side as well, there's a lot of stigma, I think, about graphic novels, the way that they're perceived. I personally, and I know that you do, and a lot of librarians do, find them to be incredibly accessible, great gateway book. And you mentioned this a little bit, like I said, with your professors, do you find any of those same sort of attitudes toward or in art toward certain styles or certain mediums?
For sure. Also, my cat has been running around like crazy this entire time. So if you hear a little bell, that's him. And he has to make his cameo at least once. I was really about to say an episode, but once a interview or once a Zoom call. So this is his cameo. And anyway, so yeah, like art style wise, I would say it's definitely like digital art for sure. And probably different forms of like printmaking. Like I feel like it's like kind of like it's a pricing thing, but it's also a tactile thing. I feel like of the layers of just art is like oil painting and paintings at the top. And then like it kind of slowly goes down from there. Printmaking is usually not as expensive. Bro, stop. It's like they don't get sold at like higher price, like as high of prices as like a painting would, or like even a photograph would. Even though printmakers are like very talented people and they also work with a lot of really cool stuff. So I've never really understood that. And you can also get really creative with prints, but and then also digital art, because there are different like just the way that I guess you can cheat with digital art. Like people will say like, oh, well, you can drop in pictures and draw on top of them. And then like you can trace things and you can import images and Photoshop them in. And like, it's not as tactile or it's not real art. But then honestly, in my mind, it's just kind of like, if someone is making something and it's reflective of like who they are, or how they feel, or what they're going through, then like, who are we to say that it's not a valid medium? So same thing with books is like, who am I to say that someone else reading a book is not a valid way of reading? And just, I think, pours a lot into the fact of like, people don't know how to mind their business. Granted, we are with this single conversation, I'm not going to be able to, like, we're not changing the art world in one step, right? Like, we're not changing it in 30 minutes, but, I've definitely been like a very open-minded when it comes time to like trying different mediums, simply because of how versatile it makes you as an artist, but then also, being able to showcase like your skill sets across various mediums that that can almost seem overwhelming to other people, but then is also like, oh, like you're like, you got it. Like you can translate, you can communicate in all these different ways, in all these different forms. And so I feel like it's the same thing with books.
Sorry, it's my turn.
Yeah.
I'm just absorbing all this.
I was listening. I mean, I have more questions if you want me to go.
Yeah.
I was thinking about some of what you were saying earlier as well, because I know we've been kind of getting a little deeper into the art, but you had talked a lot about having chosen Sabrina because she's a Black woman, and talked about how it's telling me about to raise my hand, I'm sorry. And talked about how the different social justice movements have kind of impacted your art and your choices as well. And so I didn't really want to neglect that. Like in this conversation, we've talked about obviously the pandemic, and that's had such a big impact on the art, on your life. How have those different movements impacted you as well?
How have those different movements affected me as well?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like it was tough for sure last year, like especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when I genuinely did not go outside. Like the most I went outside for was to make art and run. And like watching different Black Lives Matter protests happen in the city and feeling like I couldn't do a lot, because at the time my mom had like some health complications. And so she had gone to the hospital like numerous times. And so I'm like, okay, well, obviously for her sake, and then my own like close contact with people is not happening. And so like, it felt really like almost deflating, and like, I don't know what other words to use. So I'm going to use deflating, to feel like I was not participating in the way that I felt like I should have been, or like as active as I wanted to be. I really dove into art as like my medium of expression of just like all of the things that I was feeling at that one time. Actually at like all times, literally. And so it's kind of weird to think about like how much sadness and how much mourning happened during that time period. And like also how like, unfortunately, like I somehow benefited off of that, you know? And so like, that's obviously a conversation that's been held in numerous capacities, like not only amongst me, but then also like my other Black and brown artists who are like, yeah, man, like there are some things that I would not have gotten had we not had the summer we had last year. And like, I think the Black Lives Matter mural is a great example of just like, I'm so sorry, but the city of Charlotte would not have done a mural like that had we not had the push of several different creative communities, several different collectives and studios saying, hey, we need this. Here are the artists. Here's the design. Let's get it done. The city said, okay. And here we are. But then now our mural basically doesn't exist anymore, which I think is also another valid conversation of like, okay, so then like, what are we doing now? I also know that like a lot of my, like the artists who are on that mural were like, it was great while it happened and it was great when it happened. But we knew putting the paint down on the ground wasn't going to change anything. Like it wasn't going to change a single thing. The change happens afterwards. And so I think we're in the moment of, well, the movement, the process, the whatever of that right now. And I think that it's really cool that now at the forefront of brains of, especially of like different nonprofits, different institutions, different businesses and all that kind of stuff are like Black and brown artists that they've been able to see over the last year and some change. So there is work like in the Mint Museum, like the whole bodega that Black Market did, like that was the most ghetto thing I've ever seen in my life in the most whitest institution I've ever seen. Like I loved it, you know? And so like that kind of thing, I feel like just wouldn't have been as impactful, or I wouldn't have happened like in the way that it did without like our last like 2 years, which is really unfortunate, but it's also like, dang, like everything really does happen for a reason. And so honestly, at this point, I'm just happy to be here. We're just happy to make it this far. I feel like that was also a lot.
No.
I mean, a lot of good points.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about what you were saying about the city and Mint, and I think also, I know personally when people were protesting, I also similarly felt guilty. Like my father was staying with me, and I couldn't really risk contact, like additional contact. I think were we back at work at that point? I'm not sure, but you know, like trying to minimize contact as much as possible. And feeling guilty about not being able to be out there. But I think you brought up a good point that the work that you did in the meantime, all the art that you did, I think is a way also of, you know, participating in protest in a different way, because, you know, I think people have had to think about that a lot. And I know that that's been an ongoing conversation for a while anyway, because people with disabilities have talked a lot about how it's not like you know, it was always physically possible for people to go and to be there. And there are a lot of other reasons. So, you know, I want to recognize that is absolutely always a valid, regardless of, you know, whether we're in a pandemic or not, way of protesting. One of the things I love about art is how it can be used as a tool for protest. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, for sure. That's actually something I thought about like quite a bit too. It's just like the accessibility of protests. And then also just like the danger that comes along with them. Like you don't really think about it. Like I saw this thing on, you know, when Instagram was doing those little like cue card things with the slides, and you could be like, here's what to do at a protest. Here's what to wear. Anyway, so someone was basically like, don't wear contacts, because if you get tear gas, like it'll literally damage your eyes. And so here I am, blind, a contact wearer. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to wear my glasses to my first protest. But I was also like, had I not seen that, like what could have happened? And then also I'm just thinking about like other accessibility things like wheelchairs, like what if you're trying to participate and like you need assisted walking, like, and then the routes we would take too sometimes were not the smoothest, did not have the easiest transitions. So I'm just thinking about that too. But yeah, that's a great point for sure.
Yeah, I know that we've been, I think, in one small aspect, fortunate about there's a lot more information disseminated about what to do in a protest and stuff like that. But especially with what happened in Charlotte and the kind of things that were being employed on protesters, that it's like very much a concern. So
right.
Yeah, but again, like different ways for people to contribute, different ways for people to bring things up, and you know, art has shed light on the Black Lives movements that were going on, and then or Black Lives Matter movements that were going on, and then also about what's been going on in the pandemic. Ultimately, art, I think, is like what we're here to talk about, and is a big way that connects people together.
For sure. Nah, absolutely. And that's why I think this the graphic novel is really cool, because sometimes art can be so subjective. Like it can be, the meaning can be all over the place. Like
their interview now.
Right. It really is. It's his interview. But like, I think art can just be so all over the place sometimes. Like, it can be really hard to read to the point where you're like, I don't even know how I feel about this. Like, I don't know what is going on. But then like the graphic novel, like, you know what's going on. There is a literal story for you to follow. And so then it makes the reception of it and the thought process behind it so much easier to just absorb. And it's a literal story. So as much as people want to say like, oh, well, the artist used that color because they were sad, like, there's a lot less interpretation when it comes to graphic novels. And I think that can also be really beautiful for people to enter into a conversation that is both literary and creatively or artistically based.
I can't think of any.
Well, so since you said, I know we probably need to take some audience questions, so you let me know whenever we need to. But since you did now.
Well, let me ask, does anyone have any questions? Esther, no? Okay, so just continue. I have a few, but I'm gonna let you guys continue.
Okay, I'll just ask one more and then you since you did say like they used this color because they were sad, I did want to ask you about use of color. Because we noticed looking at your other works that you do always kind of go for like bolder, not in your photography so much, I think, but in your other works for bolder colors, like a lot of jewel tones, I think. And we noticed you still use purple and you use red, but they seem to be like a little bit grayer, a little bit. So yeah, could you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So for sure, like, so I guess to contrast them, most of my paintings are very like they're supposed to be uplifting, like they're supposed to be energizing, they're supposed to be like, wow, at you. They're supposed to like send a very direct message. I mean, obviously the graphic novel is supposed to do the same thing, but just in a different tone. I felt so weird trying to do my usual color scheme in such a very specific story. And of course I was super lost for a hot minute because I was just like, I don't even know what pen I'm supposed to use. Like, I was trying to use this watercolor brush and she was just not working for me. But then I started like kind of messing around. I added in more like line work to try and make it like darker. And yeah, that's probably like the darkest piece I've ever made. But it resonated, like it felt that way. And then that's the other thing, is like a lot of my emotions come along with colors. And so like, you'll notice like some of my darker pieces are like mentally sad Makayla, and like a lot of my brighter pieces are like super energized, really active. And so I feel like it's all kind of a reflection of what I'm making, but then also like what I'm feeling and what I'm pouring into. And so like that graphic novel specifically like felt like all of those things that I got from reading the article, but then also talking to Sabrina were very like direct in the color scheme. And then by the time I finished it, it just felt right. Like I was like, yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and ask some questions.
So I just had one question, and it's kind of like a follow-up on that, but I had it earlier. Do you have like a particular emotion that influences your best work of art? Like, do you feel like you make better pieces when you're sad, happy, mad, you know?
That is a great question. I've been trying to be more intentional with the mindset that I have when I make. So like, if I know that I'm just not feeling it, I'm not going to force myself to make anything. And I feel like that can be kind of frustrating, especially when people ask me for commissions and stuff, but it's just like, hey bro, like if I just cannot do it, like if it's just not flowing out of me as naturally as it should, then I'm not going to do it. Like it will not happen until that moment happens. And then once it does happen, oh, I'm in it for days, hours, weeks. Like for my solo show, I was in probably the best headspace I'd been in a while, but I was also, I also had like a really tough week, like the week before I started making, and then I cleared it out. I was just like, you know what? I have other things I got to focus on. And this is one of them, making like 13 of these pieces. And so then I just like poured myself into it. And I'm not necessarily sure that those are like happy, sad moments. Like you can definitely see like my mental progression over the course of all of those pieces of like, oh, well, here's where I kind of was here and here's where I kind of was over there. But the general theme across all of them is like joy and like excitement. And then also like growth and like learning through that. Like all of my pieces, I feel like I enjoy learning from each piece to each piece to each piece. So then as that process then grows, it's like I get more excited because I'm getting better at the thing that I thought I wasn't as great at in the last piece. So I guess it's excitement, and like that's where my best stuff comes from. But then I also know that I make some really good stuff when I'm sad, and that is not the best. But I feel like that's a really great outlet to pour into. So when I am sad and then I make a really cool piece, I'm like, nice, that's the end of that, and then I move on. So yeah, but like it's mainly that like I don't like to force myself to make stuff because I know it's not going to be authentic to what it should be and what it wants to be, and then also what I want for it and the intentions I have behind it.
Okay. Let me view. We had so many questions, and honestly, every time you talked, I had more questions. You have a wide breadth of interest and knowledge on so many different subjects that it's, it all brings up so much. But I think that one of the things that I don't want to leave this interview without asking about, I know we both are really interested about, is what maybe major lesson you took away from the pandemic.
Ooh. Probably just like, oh shoot, I actually kind of talked about this today, just like the day by day kind of thing, like being present for real. Like I was about to graduate in May, like before the pandemic hit. And I was thinking about like what I'd be doing after graduation. I was thinking about my track season. I was thinking about, oh, when I get back, we're going to start training. And then I had medaled in the winter and I wanted to medal again. But I was like, oh, but girl, I am coming for first place. Like, and so I was like, I'm medaling, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then Miss Rona said, no, you're not. And so like, obviously as I'm like trying to rally and figure out, okay, well, how am I supposed to spend the rest of this summer? What am I going to do? I had a couple of other things that were kind of like loose ends that I was like, I don't really know how to tie these up. And I don't know when I'm going to be able to tie these up. I was starting my first year in a high school as a teaching fellow. Had no idea how that was going to go. I'm like, are we even going to be in person? I hated online learning. And so then I was just like I was thinking about so many other things. And so it really taught me to just like, hey, like you need to slow down, and it is genuinely okay for you to like just sit in moments where you're not doing anything. My entire college career was me being busy and busy and busy and busy and finding things to fill my time and finding things to be outlets for other things and like building up my stress for no reason, but thinking that if I wasn't productive or if I wasn't doing all this stuff, I was unproductive. I wasn't a great student. I wasn't a great this, that, and the other. But then I was just like, dang, I stressed myself out for no reason. Like, obviously it was a great reason. I have a degree or whatever, but like I'm sitting at my house, bored in a house and in a house bored. And I'm like, I had all of these plans and I didn't even think about what I'd be doing today, you know? So that's the biggest thing that's probably come out of it is, so my day has become a lot of like, I'll make lists for the day. It's like, what am I going to accomplish today? Or like, what am I supposed to do today? And then I leave it at that. Like, I know I'm supposed to plan out schedule wise, like, oh, well, I have this opportunity this time. I have that opportunity that time. But it's like, I don't really think about those until it's time for me to start thinking about them, just so I can still stay in my moment, in my present. and I'm not like out and all over the place thinking about everything else. My graduate program has also helped me do that because my projects are so fast. Like they're 2-3 day turnarounds. And so it's like, I have to be very present and like, okay, well, what am I doing right now? And then how is this going to help me tomorrow? And then I've been telling people that basically if they try to ask me like, hey, what are you doing in like a month? I'm like, I don't know. Like very genuinely, I do not know. Like I should know. And I do. If I look at my calendar, I will know. But me right now, no, I have no idea. And I think that's actually been a very helpful mindset for me. And it definitely causes a lot less stress. So that is the major lesson that I've gotten from this gosh darn pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, it's two years, right? We're rounding out 2 years. So if that had been, if thinking about the future, you know, from that point had been the mentality, you know, trying to plan so far ahead, it's easy to get dragged down by that. So definitely can see how that can be a useful coping strategy. And I think it's always good to be present in the moment to remember that, you know, the day is still happening as it's happening.
Sure. Literally.
Yeah, no, but it might make our next question for you a little bit annoying.
So, after checking out your website, you're currently represented by the Elder Gallery of Contemporary Art.
Yeah.
And I know you currently have an exhibition that's going on until a couple of months. It's from October till December, I believe. I have the date, but
like it started in September, but yeah, and we're in October. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. Do you have what would you like to do in the future? I know that you don't have anything planned, but are there any opportunities you might be willing to, you know, like, oh, wow, this would be so cool if I could do this or I could do that? Because I know you've done a lot of work with a lot of different things. You've done like the murals, the illustrating for the graphic novel. And I know you've been able to, you know, get these opportunities despite having to deal with the pandemic. I just think it's really cool that you're able to, you know, flourish artistically in that way.
Yeah, it's definitely been really cool. And then also for like myself to watch, like it's been a very third party experience. Like I'm just like, dang, like I'll do something and then I'll have like a weekend or like a day to sit down and then be like, okay, like go you. Things that are coming up. Well, my murals seem to be getting bigger. So that's kind of cool. Like I have a community mural that's supposed to be happening in Matthews, and that is going to be like 480 feet long. I mean, it's not it's not myself. Like I'm not doing it all by myself, but it is underway. Things that I think would be really cool. Well, I told myself like a year ago that I really wanted to work with the Panthers. I've done work for the Panthers in some capacity. I also said I wanted to do work for the Hornets, and I'm close. So I'm like,
we'll keep it.
yeah. And so like, that's kind of cool. And I think the one that's probably coming up for me next is like Converse. Like I'd love to be able to work with Converse in a bigger way than I have, or I am right now. And then also just like with this master's degree, trying to figure out what Charlotte looks like for me in the next year or so. So I'm getting my degree in urban design, and it's been really exciting to see how not only our city is changing and how urban design is like actively happening in our city, but then also like knowing that these art projects I'm doing are in predominantly Black communities that are being negatively affected by different urban planning design, or different urban planning protocols and things like that. And so like just being like an active agent in both sides of the conversation. The other big thing I would love to do is paint a basketball court. That has yet to happen, but it is, I've talked about it a little too much for it not to happen, you know?
Right. Get out there.
Yeah, right. Like we're just universe. And that's basically all I've been doing is just like, hey, by the way, I think it'd be really cool to paint a basketball court, but I think I need to be a little more like specific on why. Because the universe doesn't just reward. Yeah, right. Like
start with like, by the way,
I know. Here's why. doesn't just reward anybody. Oh no.
Oh,
Yeah, we lost you for a second.
I think it might have.
I think it's
no.
Rosen. Makayla, can you still hear us?
My connection sounds terrible.
Oh,
Okay. All right. I was like, oh no. I was like, oh no, you guys froze. And then everyone froze except me. And I was like, oh, I'm the problem. It's me. Okay. But we're back.
We lost maybe the last sentence. Do you want to give us the last two sentences? Or
just like the universe doesn't just reward nicely. You have to be very specific on the stuff you ask for, because you'll give it, but just not in the way that you expected it. And then you're like, oh, I mean, I'm not mad. I'm not angry, but this was unexpected. So yeah.
hopefully the universe comes through. I think that's it for us in terms of time today. Thank you so much for joining us. This was such a wonderful conversation. And thank you for your work on the pandemic graphic novel. This is such a cool initiative. The Living Archives initiative is really incredible, and it's awesome getting to speak with you today.
Yeah, I can only hope that. I know it's going to be uploaded online, and I think about things that I look forward to. Just kind of I like listening to people, reading about past events, and just kind of seeing personal either articles, documentations, or quotes, recordings from people. I dealt with this big event, and this is kind of what my life was like. It's really cool to see this not only as an insight into the story that you covered, but also an insight into your life, just kind of to see where you're at this moment. Yeah.
Thank y'all. I appreciate this. And then you guys asked some really good questions. So thank you guys for that. Wow.
Thank you for being here, Makayla. I got to talk to you later because it's a lot to discuss. Wow, that was amazing.
Say less.
Yeah. Okay. And thank you, Omar and Ron. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you
and
so
thank
much
you for coming, Esther.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah. So this will be up on YouTube, and you all can see your pretty faces later. It'll be tonight or tomorrow. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good night.